My name is Charlene Watkins. I'm the Foreign Language Services Coordinator in the Office of the Executive Secretary of the Supreme Court of Virginia. This session seeks to focus on providing valuable information and a toolbox of resources that tries to better prepare those in courts to respond to an issue that really knows no bounds and dogs those in our communities, sadly, in some cases from cradle to grave. We have with us the most esteemed Deborah Taylor Tate, who is the director of the Administrative Office of the Courts in Tennessee and COSCA, and also co-chair of the National Judicial Opioid Task Force, and whose work on the national opioid epidemic has earned her the Justice Janice Holder Access to Justice Award. And she has a long history in both behavioral health and also in communications. In behavioral health, she is currently an adjunct lecturer at the Vanderbilt School of Nursing, and she is the former executive director of the State Health Facilities Commission and chairman of the board of Centerstone Incorporated, which is the largest nonprofit community mental health provider. She continues in the board for Centerstone Research Institute and also HealthStream. In terms of communications from 2005 to 2009, she was the commissioner of the FCC, and she's currently the vice chair of the Multicultural Media, Telecom, and Internet of DC Council of DC. And she is the first laureate for child online protection from the International Telecommunications Union in Geneva, and she is also the recipient of an End of Slavery Award as well. So she has obviously a lot of good information to share. She is focused on getting courts a seat at the table in terms of the issues that we grapple with on a daily basis. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Debbie, who is going to share all of this great information with us.
Thank you so much. We are from sister states, Tennessee and Virginia, so it's always lovely to be with someone who can understand my language, right? Doesn't need an interpreter. But I want to thank NACM, first of all, for inviting me. I think I was with you all 2 years ago when this journey just started. And so while our task force is ending, the sad story is that the opioid crisis is not. And in fact, while the states around Tennessee have seen a reduction in overdose cases relating to not only opioids but other addictive substances as well, Tennessee has seen a huge increase. And so this is something that is very near and dear to me. Many of you all may have had a personal experience as well. Mine have been quite personal, and so just since I got started on this work, I have become more dedicated. In fact, at 6 a.m. this morning, I was listening to a TED Talk while I was on the treadmill because I just try to understand as much as I can about what is going on across our country. I think that you all maybe have read and remember when I was here before, I talked about the fact that more people have died from the opioid crisis than from the entire Vietnam War and then die from cancer. Think how much our country is spending on cancer research, and not that that is not very important. I lost both my parents to cancer, but we have just got to continue to put more resources, and that's one of the things that I'm going to be talking about, hopefully that will help you all as well. I also want to thank SJI because without their investment in the task force, we would not have been able to do the work that I'm going to show you. And then, of course, the Conference of Chief Justices have been extremely involved. My co-chair is Loretta Rush. Anybody here from Indiana? She is just fabulous. And so we have been crisscrossing the country to talk about these resources. So with that said, let me go ahead and advance these slides so I can tell you a little bit more about the magnitude and the impact. So I can't go to a stadium anymore without having this thought. I used to go to a stadium, have a great time. Now all I see is this is the number of people who have died. And yet what's more important is that it's not just numbers and statistics, it's that every single one of those people was a human life that touched many, many people. Parents, grandparents, nieces and nephews, daughters and sons. What is the financial impact to us as taxpayers? The White House has said it's already reaching $1 trillion, and you all can see how quickly the lines have gone up. And so it's not just impacting the court system and the state courts specifically, but it is also, and it's not just impacting our healthcare systems, but it is really about lost productivity, our workforce. We have 5,000 jobs coming into Nashville, and literally the CEOs do not know where they're going to find the people to hire. And then, of course, the additional jail beds and foster care for children who are being removed. So just to give you an example, here our crisis worsens. In one weekend, we lost 9 young people, and you all will not believe this. They thought they were just smoking a joint. It was laced with fentanyl. This is how strong fentanyl and carfentanil are. It's used to tranquilize elephants, and this is the amount next to the penny that it would take to kill several people. So when these horrible, awful street druggies grind up the fentanyl and lace it in a variety of drugs, sadly, that is the impact that we're now beginning to see. So it's not just the opioid crisis. In many places, we've returned to the meth crisis, in Appalachia especially, as well as all of the new analog drugs that have come out of that. So it's not just in our criminal courts, which I go out and talk about a lot, because most of the public just thinks, oh, we've got recovery courts, we have mental health courts, and we've got criminal courts, of course, so we just need to put these people in jail. Here are all of the variety of cases and types of courts that are involved. So that's why y'all's job, your job, is so very important in working with all these different layers and levels of courts. This is a map that I just find fascinating. So it is the cross-section of drug mortality and foster care rates. I think it is being updated right now. But if you all are out speaking, this is something great to show. Tennessee is right there in the middle of the country, and it's just solid red all the way over to Virginia and West Virginia and Kentucky. And so we thought kinship care and grandparents would be a great idea, right? So sadly, this is a multi-generational problem. It is so complex and so concentrated. I sent a group of judges to Ohio, and the weekend they were there, this occurred. Grandparents who had custody of a 7-year-old grandchild in the back. So not only had he been removed from his own parents with drug addiction problems, then he was placed with his grandparents, and they actually sadly died. So what are the other impacts? Many of you all know about NAS, which we still are not even sure about all of the future issues that these children may face as both children going into our school systems and even growing up. One of the most unexpected things, I think, is to find out that more women than ever are in jail and longer stays. One of the reasons is because there's so many fewer resources for women. And I know some of you all may have been in the human trafficking breakout session yesterday. It was just fabulous. But we are hoping that our governor is going to be putting more money in so that we can move these women from jail into the treatment that they truly need. So, our national task force. Many of you all may know people who have served on it. We had judges, specialists in the field of addiction, brain scientists, neuroscientists, and several NACM members. You all may know Marcia Meese from Illinois and Corey Steele from Nebraska. They both were chairs of a subcommittee, of some of our subcommittees, as well as Nancy Dixon from Kansas. And I don't know if you all know them, but please thank them. This was just an incredible gift of their service. So I want to show you all what this looks like. You all can get all of these materials online. This is a huge booklet that we put together that has every single one of the materials. So after this, if you all want to come up and just dig a few out of here, you're welcome to. I just couldn't bring enough of these packets. SJI did a wonderful job, and if you all see Jonathan Mattiello, you might ask him if there are going to be any more funds so that you can actually get an entire set. But I know many of you all may just want some very specific ones about the areas of courts that you may work in. It is extremely detailed, extremely comprehensive. And what we tried to do was organize it in terms of children and families, first of all. And if you just look at how detailed some of these are, in terms of medically assisted treatment for adolescents. So for instance, in Tennessee, we had many, many rural judges who did not even believe in MAT, medically assisted treatment for adults, much less for adolescents and youth. And so one of the things that I felt was important in my role as the court administrator was to train judges. And so we have been training our judges for the past 2 years. We've trained over 1,000 judges and probably 2,000 court staff to those judges. And this would give you some excellent materials to be able to use. If you would like to have PowerPoints, if you want videos, all those are also available. What we tried to do was pair a judge and like an addiction specialist or a neuroscientist to talk about how much we now know about brain science that we never knew before. It is an entire new field. There are now addiction specialists. So what we tried to do was have our judges hear from a judge as well as a specialist, a judge who was already engaged in some of these programs and projects. There is one about treating pregnant women, of course, and then the court's role in reshaping the child welfare system. So you all may be aware, anybody here specifically work with juvenile courts? A new Families First Prevention Act was passed, and I'm so proud because my senator is the chairman of the Health Committee, Lamar Alexander, and he really championed this new the update of Families First, so that for the first time ever, instead of putting kids into custody in order to get treatment for them or for their families, you can now use the money for prevention. And what is also great is that it expanded it beyond just services for the child who may need services, but to the entire family as well. So I really encourage you all to try to get your child welfare agencies to pull down those dollars because there's much more funding available. Another area that we looked at was civil and criminal justice. Again, all the way from, on the far left, understanding just the very basics of addiction. None of us, I don't think anybody in here, went to medical school. These are all new words, a new language, how you talk with people about substance abuse issues. And so we wanted to go all the way back to understanding the basics. One of the other things I wanted to call your attention to is the strategies for rural, frontier, and underserved communities. If any of you all are from rural areas, I want to call your attention also to this Rural Community Action Guide. 2 weeks ago, I was fortunate enough to go to the White House. The White House Office of Drug Control Policy has been working on this for over a year to pull together every single federal funding stream that is available for the opioid crisis. Of course, this can be used beyond the opioid crisis as well for other addictions, but that is something too that you will be able to get online, and many more resources go along with that in terms of sending you directly to whichever federal agency has the money. One of the things that I wanted to mention to you is on the top right, fentanyl and the precautions inside a courthouse. I laminated a kind of a guide about how to treat this. Anybody from Massachusetts? I think you all have actually banned fentanyl from the courthouses. And so you may want to tell us about that as soon as I get through about what you all are doing. But I think that it is very, very important. I don't know how many of you all, but I have judges call me, oh gosh, I wanted to say once a week. It may not be that often, with someone who is in front of them and just falls out, has overdosed. And so part of that is just the scare of who else could be impacted by having any kind of fentanyl or their analogs on them. Again, collaboration and education. So this is something that you all are such a part of. You all can make such a difference in your communities, in your court system, and many of these, the SUD Dictionary for State Courts. So we copied this and put it into a little book and gave it to all of our judges. So they have a dictionary up there so that whether it's a defendant or whether it's an addiction specialist who is testifying, they can actually quickly look up some of the terms. I will call your attention to words matter. So I was with the Surgeon General week before last. One of the things that he is saying now is, yes, people are dying every day from the opioid crisis, but what they're really dying from is stigma. And so this is a really great judicial language. Words really do matter in how we talk to people. And I know that in the human trafficking breakout, again, the judge was just talking about how the people who come in front of you, going from a defendant to a victim, and how you start to get cues when people are standing in front of you. Oh, the other one, is anybody here from one of the tribal nations? We got a lot of great ideas, because you may be able to speak to this, because we don't have this in Tennessee, but we were able to kind of copy and use as a template the sample court transfer agreements that many state courts have with tribal nations. And so what we have done is replicate that for state and federal courts. So federal courts have not been dealing with the 95% of the cases that state courts deal with, right? They are dealing with prosecuting huge pharmaceutical companies. And so one of the things that we have been trying to talk with them about, in fact, I'm meeting with the chief of our U.S. District Federal Court in Nashville to talk about actually bringing some of those people into our recovery courts. So again, just to click through a few of the ones that are kind of the basic ones that we started with. Again, how many of you all have Narcan either in your clerk's office or in the courtroom? Only a couple of people. Really, really important. In fact, I gave this talk at my church, and people came up afterwards and said, do you have any with you, because our church doesn't have any. And so several women went out from that Sunday school class, bought Narcan, and we now have it all throughout our church. That was the specific one that I just mentioned. And so let me also give you some positive news, right? There are positive things that are going on. One of the things that we wanted to do with our task force was to get judges to really see themselves as conveners in the community. And probably juvenile courts have had to do this, and juvenile judges, more than maybe the rest of the state level and trial level courts. But these are just a few of the great things that are going on across the country, again, in our materials. And so you are welcome to go back and get the slideshow or look up some of the judges. Our judge, I'm so proud about, Judge Dwayne Sloan, is over there with Chief Justice Roberts. So in December, he was awarded the William Rehnquist Award. One judge out of the entire country receives this award from Chief Justice Roberts. We had a dinner at the United States Supreme Court. It was just pretty amazing. And so what did that judge do? This cabin was a beautiful family vacation home up near Dollywood. Where is Dollywood? It's in one of the very poorest parts of Tennessee in Appalachia. It has the most stunning view of the Smoky Mountain National Park. But what does it also have? One of the highest rates of overdoses, huge numbers of pregnant women. And the judge was just seeing these women day after day come in front of him. And he just could not figure out, what is making these women do this? How can I learn more about addiction, and how can I get involved? So he went and got this family to donate that cabin. It now houses pregnant women, and every single baby that has been born, that has gone through his program, has been born healthy. So it is just an incredible success story. So of course, we are trying to replicate that across Tennessee. Specialty courts, many of you all have them, I know. Judge Hanna on the right was in Buffalo, New York, another place that was really heavily hit by the crisis. So what would he do? If a defendant got into his particular recovery court, which was specifically an opioid court, he would see that person for the first 30 days because those 30 days are extremely important. He would talk to them. He would actually spend time with them, not just kind of herd them through. And so in so doing, he has had some really terrific outcomes. Here are some of the programs that are responding specifically to children and families. START, anybody here in Kentucky? They are funding this particular program, and I'm sorry I don't have the West Virginia one because they have something similar where a crisis team goes out within 24 hours of someone being released after an overdose, whether they were released from jail or released from the ER. In a similar manner, START does the same thing where people actually go out and visit with and see these families. In both Florida and Tennessee, we are trying to utilize safe baby courts in order to bring all of the children. So if a baby 0 to 3 has somehow been involved with a parent with a substance abuse problem, then we are trying to bring all the family underneath what we are calling safe baby courts. And we will launch our 12th one in about a month. So I'm very excited about that. Massachusetts, he may know more about this than I do, but again, both pre-release and post-release, it is just so important that we connect these people with services while they are actually in jail, or if they can be diverted before jail for nonviolent crimes, then to get them into treatment services. Again, lots of people are trying to utilize technology. So think about how far apart Montana's courts are. And one of the things that they have really been using is all kinds of teleservices. At one of our first meetings 2 years ago, somebody was there who works with a lot of defendants who are now out across Montana, and she has a picture of these ranchers up on top of their trucks doing their therapy or doing yoga. And so to see this guy balanced up on top of his truck was pretty incredible. And then New Mexico's Project Echo is also in Vermont. Anybody from those two states? Again, very simple. It's a hub and spoke model. We're trying to do this in Nashville because we have Vanderbilt, a very deep research with a lot of addiction specialists in the center of the state, but then it takes 6 or 7 hours to get to the other parts of the state. So we're trying to replicate what they've been doing in New Mexico. Again, some of you all may know, and if you are interested at all, we would love to have you join. Tennessee is part of the Appalachian Midwest. We call it RJOY. The National Center for State Courts is supporting it. We have a website. If you are in any of those states, we would love to have you be on these webinars and calls with us. One of the things that we are trying to do, obviously, is share best practices, and the other thing that we're trying to do is keep 8 states of data so that we are actually seeing what is successful and, sadly, perhaps what is not. The New England states are not quite as organized, but I know that that group of states are trying to pull together as well. Here are just a few of our projects. I already talked about Safe Baby. I will tell you about the Vanderbilt Bridge Clinic. I haven't heard of this clinic anywhere else, but the doctors, again, continued to see the same people overdosing and coming into the emergency rooms. So they decided to try something new. It's called the Bridge Clinic. When you leave the ER, you are walked across the street to a clinic. You are given a prescription for whichever one of the medications that this specialist think that you need for medically assisted treatment. And if you can't be seen that day, you are told exactly when and who you will be partnered with, and you are also given a peer advocate who has similarly been through the system, although it's brand new, but someone who is now in active recovery. We've tried to do the same thing with peer-to-peer mentoring of aging out foster children so that they have someone to partner with who has actually been through the system. One of the other things that our fabulous Judge Sloan did, and this is what he does in court, he has the moms bring the babies every single time that they come to court, and he holds the babies up there and talks to the babies. It's so remarkable. I wish I had a video to show you all. It was actually on the Today Show, and they came down and filmed because it's so inspiring. But one of the things that the judge decided was we cannot drug court our way out of this. We can't jail our way. We can't arrest our way out of this issue. And so he has created a very simplified, and it's called 10 Rocks, but it's a strategy that any judge, if you're a probate judge, if you're any judge that sees any type of case, because the people who are coming in front of you for eviction, landlord-tenant, bankruptcy, many of them, this was the precipitating event. So he has an entire strategy that judges are starting to adopt across the country. Oh, and let me go back and just say one more thing. One of the other things that SJI did was to fund this strategy and a week-long training. So every single one of your states sent either 1 or 2 judges that went through this week-long training to learn the basics of addiction, to learn everything that is in this resource guide, and then to have Judge Sloan talk about this particular strategy. We had experts, neuroscientists again, addiction experts, mental health experts at the National Judicial College. So someone in your states were all trained. And the whole purpose of this was to train the trainers so they would go back and then be a resource for you all, for me to be able to call on. And I'm already sending our judges who were there out to do some of these presentations. So the employer perspective, we are all also employers, right? I have hundreds of people who work for the court, for the AOC, and so one of the other things that we've been trying to do is provide some resources for you all as employers, for your employees and for the court's employees, because we should be setting a really great example. So yesterday, I actually missed, our chamber was launching a new toolkit. This is patterned after the U.S. Chamber's toolkit, so these are both available online. I know Indiana has one. A lot of your state chambers have put together a toolkit like this. It's really to help employers who are out there dealing with persons who have active addiction issues. This is a company in Indiana. I asked before, but did anybody come in from Indiana? They are doing such great things. So this CEO became very invested in his employees who had some kind of addiction problem. And so he wanted to get them into services. He didn't want them to lose their time off or their any of their savings, their retirement plan. And so they moved them obviously, off of any kind of mechanical type work. They either do desk work, phone work, whatever else they can do so that they don't lose their position. And if they're successful and they stay in the therapy, then they're able to return. So obviously it started out very small, but this is a very rural area, and so those jobs really matter. They are now expanding this across the country. Again, just a few more workplace solutions that you all may want to take a look at. This is on the CDC webpage. And then what I did was pull together everything that Tennessee does. So this is something I would really suggest that you all go back home. What does your Medicaid provider or your Department of Mental Health, we have safety net funds that if somebody doesn't meet all the other criteria for assistance, that I can access some of those funds. So I would just encourage you all to be a good example and go do this for your own employees. I spoke at the National HR Summit. So all of your HR directors were there, and they've kind of seen a more in-depth version of this. Again, just so you've got the numbers right there, so if someone has an issue or their family member, they come to talk to you, be willing to talk to them. This is Centerstone. You all heard as a disclaimer that I've been on that board for many, many years. They are also trying to work with workplaces in the 6 or 7 states that Centerstone is now in so that they can actually send out addiction specialists to educate the workforce, to actually talk to people who may have issues, and then of course to refer them to treatment. And so what is next? So several times, I know I've heard several presentations talk about legal services. I was really, really honored, and I don't have their report with me, but again, all of this is online. I was able to serve on their national task force, and the major recommendation out of that is to expand what has been called medical legal partnerships. So I know that in many of your states, you all already have these. We have 2 children's hospitals where there is actually a medical legal partnership inside the children's hospital, because why? The parent is sitting there with all these issues from surprise medical bills and huge medical debt. Tennessee is number 2 in the nation. And so I'm so excited that we're expanding these programs, but also maybe they were evicted. Maybe the child is in the hospital because they have asthma. You know, all kinds of other civil legal issues. So if you all don't know about these, I would strongly encourage you to take a look at their report. The other thing that they hope to be able to do is not just have a lawyer and a doctor, but to have, for instance, a nurse practitioner or one of these navigators that if you all were in the previous breakout session, that we might connect people who are there all the time, just like the navigators are in court. And then, of course, one of the things that we have learned over the past 2 years is this is far beyond just an opioid epidemic, right? And it is an epidemic, and it has been declared that, obviously, by the Surgeon General and HHS, but it is a much larger addiction problem, and then underlying addiction issues, obviously, are mental health problems. So the National Center, the Chief Justices, and my organization, COSCA, have all committed to a multi-year now mental health initiative. So you all will see the same kinds of materials at the end of their work. They do have a website as well, so if you go on the website that is in all these materials, the National Center's website, you can also find what they are doing all along the way regarding mental health. And I just wanted to leave you all with a couple of ways that you all can truly, truly make a difference in your particular positions. Because I think lots of times I hear speakers and I go, well, how does that impact me? Or what could I really do? So I just wanted to give you a couple of quick things to think about. It takes us 9 times of hearing something to truly know it and truly ingest it. And so I want everybody to think about a time, maybe you're sitting in traffic, say addiction is a brain disease 9 times. Because that is really the first step in beginning to appreciate what people are going through. Support your family and friends. When I gave my talk at our church, I had no idea. Families came up to me afterwards. They were dealing with a sister-in-law, an adult child. It was heartbreaking. These are people I see every Sunday, and I had no idea whatsoever. So be supportive. Then as employers, I gave you a really great kind of checklist of things that you can do for your own employees. The toolkits out there are just amazing. And then of course, be a leader. Go out and speak. Speak at a civic club. I try to do one probably once a week just to try to share the information. And as I said, we are losing people more than ever in Nashville. 4 people will die in Tennessee before I get home tonight. And so I really think it is incumbent upon me in my role as a leader in the court community to be out there speaking, especially to lay persons. Start parent-to-parent peer programs if you all are not doing that. I just think it is really, really important for parents who have either been through this or parents who are going through it with their own children. And then train everybody that you possibly have the opportunity to train. We are now training our clerks because who sees more of our citizens than anybody? They're coming in to pay their fines and fees, right? They're coming in to get their cars registered. And so we really found out that those people are so in touch with the public. Include the media. This is something I wanted to show you all. So Sesame Street is so committed to this crisis that they have a character. You can go online, you can get the videos. I've sent them to my younger friends who have young children just for them to even see them. But to think about the fact that 1 in 8 children under 11 live with a parent with some kind of SUD in this country. I mean, these are gigantic numbers. And it's not just in Tennessee. It's in all of our states. It's across our whole country. Encourage the legal medical partnerships. If you all don't know about that, I think that that is just really, really great. And then coordinate with all of your courts. Don't just think, oh, the drug courts in our state are doing that. They're taking care of that. They've got it. Or even in Tennessee, we have mental health courts. Oh, they can just deal with it. We'll just put people over there. Because these people are in every court, and they are crying out for all of our help. So with that said, happy to talk, happy to hear more of what you all are doing in your court. I urge you all to go buy Narcan or find out from your law enforcement who will provide that for free in every courthouse, every clerk's office. And I just thank you all so much for inviting me to be here. I'm so proud of our materials, so come up and take a few. I have plenty. Do you want to talk about what you all are doing in your courthouse?
I can just say, we have been,
Well, it's being recorded.
we have been fentanyl from our courthouses. I actually am in the juvenile court, so we don't really see a lot of that. Our Chief Justice is here, though, Chief Carey. She could probably explain better. She's here today.
She's on our task force.
Yes, she's on the task force.
And
She's here for another breakout. So I'm not quite sure how it works. I know we have policies and procedures for when obviously you have a case involving fentanyl. But what I can say is our court security staff, they're all trial court employees. Each and every one has been trained to carry and carries Narcan. We've saved a number of people's lives in the actual court settings because of the fact that all the court officers are trained to carry, and they do carry Narcan. So.
Did you all pay for that, the court system?
I believe we did, yes.
Okay. So in some
I don't know. I can't say for sure. Again, I don't know if we were given if there was a grant
Right.
separate and apart from our operating budget, but it did come from us.
In some of your court systems, And in some of your even counties, law enforcement has been handing these out. So where we have a judge and a sheriff, for instance, that are great buddies, it's very helpful because they have a lot of access. And then I have just been trying to beg, borrow, and steal whenever I could get it for other courts who don't have that kind of relationship. But I would encourage you all to be sure that you do that. Jonathan, I thanked you all profusely. And without you, this would never have occurred. So thank you. Anybody else? Thank you for telling us about that. I think that you all may be one of the few states that has an outright ban.
I have a question. In looking at the map of Virginia, for instance, I noticed that our red sections were the more rural areas, and you did underscore the rural initiative. Can you share a little bit about how rural communities may deal with this differently than more of the urban areas and the like, and the impact of that, please?
Right, and so obviously for anyone here who is from a rural area, that is the entire reason that the federal agencies and the White House Office of Drug Control specifically created this, because obviously fewer resources, more of the problem, probably very, very few addiction specialists that are scattered out there, and certainly very few that deal with children. So I think it is a huge problem. And then this also goes back to the underlying issues that I just spoke about in terms of the mental health issues. And I know in Appalachia we have seen huge numbers of jobs disappear. We have people who have been hopeless, not just right now, but maybe for multi-generations of hopelessness. And so I think that's another reason that Judge Sloan has been so inspirational, because he is the epitome of one person can really make a difference. He now has a multi-million-dollar grant because he went and stood on people's doorsteps and said, my community is going to disappear. People are dying every day. And so I think that one of the things is for all of us to be leaders in those areas, if that is indeed where you live, and to give people some tools to either be able to get funding, but oftentimes it's really not getting a $1 million grant. It is really pulling everybody in your community together. And I'll just put in, we have a Faith and Justice Center inside our AOC. And so some states may find that a little difficult to imagine, but in these rural towns, oftentimes it's the church, the synagogue, the congregation where people can get help. And so they have been incredible partners for us in terms of helping people with everything from baby diapers to providing oversight of visitation for families to be able to keep up those relationships.
Any other questions? Well, I have another one. So obviously I became the host because I was really interested in this topic. You shared the interest or the importance of a judge as a convener, and in particular, you shared the example in your state of a judge really being a leader in this field. I'm interested to know, because you've underscored a few of the other initiatives from other industries, like in employment and behavioral health, et cetera. There are a bunch of resources out there. Do you have a clearinghouse in Tennessee of all of this, where everyone kind of meets on the same page and, oh, did you know about this? Did you know about that? And let me share with you this particular thing. How do you start that discussion or that sharing?
So we are very fortunate, because I spoke about our joy, that regional group of 8 states. And so those people are all made up of very committed individuals. Judge Sloan happens to chair that. I wonder about his caseload sometimes, because he must never sleep. But one of the great things about that is that we are able on those, whether it's a webinar or a teleconference or a video conference, to be able to talk about what's going on. I may not know something that is going on in far west Tennessee, But because we have these regular opportunities, we also have a great relationship with our Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse. That is where most all the federal money flows down from HHS and SAMHSA to families. And so if you all don't already have that relationship, that is a great one to have. And of course, they post all the opportunities for grants, and their staff can be very helpful because they've dealt with all these agencies at the federal level, which courts, we've never done that before. And so that's another reason that I was so glad about the Rural Community Action Guide. On USDA, if you can imagine, the Department of Agriculture has one of the most robust funding websites in terms of what people, and it's only for rural areas, right? So we hosted USDA in Tennessee and hosted probably 1,000 people came to this from all over the state just to hear about what was available. They can pay for vans. They can pay for housing. I mean, it is remarkable. So again, it is really good to find that person in your states who is the director of USDA for your state, because they've got the relationships with the feds to be able to wind their way through some very complicated, frankly, funding mechanisms. But the money is there. The president and Congress continue to put more funding into this. So I just really, really encourage you all both to go find your state commissioner who gets the substance abuse funding and get to know them if you don't know them already. Set up a meeting with judges and those. If you all don't have, we have mental health liaisons, so we already have a relationship built in. But if you don't have that type of relationship, it's a great, in some ways this is making lemonade out of lemons. So I think I told you all I just got back from NCSL. I was the only person from the entire judicial branch who had been invited to be there. And so I finally feel like we're making some inroads, that we are a critical player in many public policy issues, but the opioid crisis has opened that door for us. And so I just hope that that will continue to happen, because it's very difficult with your day job to try to learn what executive or legislative agencies are doing. So it was a great opportunity, and I was really glad to get to reiterate over and over and over how important the state courts are and how important judges and all of you all are in this fight. Thank you all. I'm happy to answer any questions, and please come up here and take some of these.
Any more questions? You know, in the world of courts, a lot of the people who have some of these substance abuse disorders have an experience with courts from the point of view of, oh, there's a crime involved and the like. How do you think courts can shift in terms of being more of the supportive, collaborative partner that you're describing in many of these programs? How do you think are there some ways to, I guess, train frontline staff in that way, or to try to shift from the view of this is the criminal justice process and this is more of a human justice process sort of thing?
Right. So I think that's one of the reasons that assessments on the very front end become so important. So we are about to launch criminal justice reform in Tennessee, and one of the things that we're trying to do is trying to get all of the judges, law enforcement to adopt assessment tools, right? And because that does give you a window into what is going on with this person. But then just as simple as actually talking to someone, finding out what their problems are, what their situation is. And so I think that some of these more basic resources about stigma, how to talk about addiction, and even just the plain old dictionary, you know, we wanted to arm our judges with all that. What we then figured out was, we need to be training all your staff as well, because that's who is seeing these people on the front end. And so now we have been going back, and especially with our juvenile court staff, I think that we've trained over 2,000 of them so far. Yes, ma'am.
You mentioned probate courts. I'm from South Carolina, and I am a probate judge, and in South Carolina, the probate judge is the judge that issues someone to involuntary commitment. And under our statute, it is people that are living with a mental illness who are chemically dependent. What suggestion do you have for people in a role like I have, where I'm trying to educate my community and say, look, it's not just mental health, it is a bigger issue. And so what I've tried to do is I've tried to look at every single designated examiner report that comes through, because we have mental health facilities that people are only allowed to stay for as long as insurance will pay for it, and so they're in for 3 days and out, and they're not getting the help that they need. So what I want to do is I want to educate my community and say, look, even though you think that this is mental illness or a mental health issue, it goes deeper than that, because many of these people have a substance abuse problem that's under that. How can I better educate my community?
Well, it sounds like you're being a great advocate, and thank you, Judge, for doing that, because I think it really does. One person, you like Judge Sloan, can truly make a difference in your community. One of the things that I think we haven't done a very good job of, and it's funny because this is like with my communications hat on, is reaching out to the media, because there has been this exhaustion about the opioid epidemic. And so people quit writing about it for a while. And so I literally got on the phone and called all of the media outlets and said, we have this new resource, I'd like to come on and talk about it. And so it just kind of stirred up some more interest, and especially when I said the states around us are making progress. Not to call anyone out, but here are the facts. More people are dying. We have got to get the community engaged. And the whole thing about insurance, one of the TED Talks that I listened to this morning was a mom who, after numerous times of getting their daughter out of numerous rehab programs, was unsuccessful, and she finally did overdose and die. And that mom has now taken on she started pulling together community leaders and her friends, and they have now built a home. I wish I could even remember what little town, but it was just a town where she got her church and people that she knew, civic clubs, together to talk about that. So, I think for you're a female judge. There are a lot of female lawyers who are interested in these issues. A lot of them do probate matters, and so I think the other thing that we're going to have to do as a society is also flip this. 28 days is not going to do it. And so one of the other resources that has not come out yet, I don't know if you all know the organization AAAP. They are addiction specialists, and so every addiction specialist in the country, I think they have like 4,000 members. They are about to come out with their own guidebook, and part of it is going to be about the fact that this 28 days, this is not how you get somebody past, especially an opioid disorder, because your brain has literally organically changed. So the more you can pair yourself with an expert in the field who says this from a factual matter, this isn't a moral failure. This isn't that somebody wasn't committed to the program. This is that their brain changed. We have a doctor that goes out and speaks with us a lot, and he actually was had an opioid disorder himself, and he talks about pulling up. This is unbelievable. I wish I had his tape. He pulled up to a Walgreens. He had a gun in his glove compartment. He was on vacation with his family, beautiful family, wonderful life, an incredible doctor, and he got the gun out because he was going to go in and steal the drugs at the pharmacy because he hadn't brought his 500 pills that he needed for vacation. And so when he goes out and speaks about this, he could not control the cravings that his brain felt. He said, what if you'd been in the desert for 2 or 3 days and someone is holding water out? What if you hadn't eaten a bite for 2 or 3 days? Not just fasting, but if you literally had had not a morsel of food, what would that craving be like? And he said, this craving for opioids is 1,000, 10,000 times your brain. That's all you want. So, but I think it does help to pair yourself with an expert. Thank you all. You've been so attentive. Please come get some of these materials. Please know that they are all available for free. They really look very nice when you print them off. I've taken, gosh, I feel like I print 1,000 a week to take to some group or organization. So please, please go on and see if one of those might be able to help you. And thank you.
Thank you so much, Debbie.